I grew up around the same line you probably did. Rent is throwing money away, and a house is your best investment. It sounds tidy. It also lets you feel like a financial genius for mowing the lawn. But when I ran the numbers over the years, the story broke. Your primary home gives comfort, memories, and the joy of arguing about paint colors. Financially, though, it usually behaves more like a consumption item than an investment. That is not a bad thing, it is just a different thing. Let me set the table with one clean idea. An investment is something you buy because you expect it to pay you or appreciate in a way that beats doing nothing, while giving you flexibility to exit or rebalance. A house you live in pays you in hot showers and quiet Sundays, not in cash flow. That distinction matters because it shapes how you build wealth. If you came here for calm, math-first money thinking without the drama, you are in the right place. If you want more breakdowns like this, hit like so I know to keep going, subscribe to follow the experiments, and drop a comment telling me the biggest money belief you were taught about home ownership. I am not here to dunk on buying a home. I own where I live sometimes. I rent other times, depending on the season of life. I am here to pull the belief apart so you can make a smarter call for your situation. Because what most people want is not a deed, it is options. Options to change jobs, to move across town for a better school, to travel for a year, to invest when markets are attractive, and to sleep well without worrying that one roof leak wipes out the emergency fund. That is the real problem. The cozy myth of the forever investment can quietly steal those options if you treat your primary residence like a stock with a porch. Let me name the target so we stop aiming at the wrong bullseye. What most people want is stable housing, growing net worth, and the freedom to change plans without lighting money on fire. Call it flexibility with ballast. Investments are the ballast that compounding rides on. A true investment has expected positive return, can be sold without a circus, and does not depend on your personal use to justify holding it. Your index fund does not care if you sleep in it. Your bond fund does not ask you to replace its water heater. Your primary residence, in contrast, delivers value mostly through use. The moment you move in, you start consuming that value as shelter and stability. There is nothing wrong with that. It just means the return you get is mostly non-cash. When you frame it this way, the desire becomes clearer. You want the soft benefits of home life and the hard benefits of investments that pay you. You want to pick your neighborhood without putting 80% of your net worth into a single illiquid asset and calling it diversification. You want to harness leverage wisely, not be at the mercy of it. And you want to be able to say yes to opportunities because your capital is not bolted to a foundation. So the task is not to avoid houses, it is to put them in the right bucket. Use assets go in the life bucket, investment assets go in the wealth bucket. When you keep them separate in your head and in your accounts, you can pursue both goals without them fighting each other. That is the quiet win we are after. A life that feels settled and a portfolio that is actually working, not just sitting behind drywall. If you have ever felt pressure to buy, you are not imagining it. Banks make money on mortgages. Agents make money on transactions. Builders make money when you want extra crown molding. Your friends beam when you post a front porch selfie. All of that creates a warm breeze nudging you toward a big purchase. The hidden friction starts the next morning. Your house does not pay you rent, it bills you. Mortgage interest shows up every month. Property taxes rise with values. Insurance and maintenance are relentless. Roofs age on their own schedule. When you add it up, the ongoing cost often erodes most of the headline appreciation. Then you have liquidity friction. Selling a house is slow, uncertain, and costly, with fees that can chew 5% to 7% of the sale price. While you wait for a buyer, your capital is stuck. Diversification friction shows up too. One address concentrates your risk in a single local economy. A factory closure, a highway reroute, or a school boundary change can move your home value in ways the national average will not protect. And there is emotional friction. We justify upgrades because we live there. That is normal. But the kitchen that makes you happier does not automatically make you richer. All of this interacts with psychology. Loss aversion makes people hold through long slumps because selling feels like admitting defeat. The sunk cost fallacy nudges them to pour more into renovations to rescue old spending. Social comparison makes them stretch for a house that photographs well. It adds up to a lot of capital tied up in a single asset that is not paying you, while the diversified portfolio you meant to build stays small for years. That is the costly part of the myth. Here's the model I use to decide what role a house should play. First, I separate use from investment. A use asset is judged by the quality of life it delivers per dollar. An investment asset is judged by expected return, liquidity, and diversification. Second, I run the cash flow test. If an asset would produce net income when used by someone else and still make sense without me living in it, it belongs in the investment bucket. If its value proposition is me enjoying it, it goes in the use bucket. Third, I check the 4 traits that define real investments. It tends to earn positive return, it can be sold or rebalanced easily, it diversifies instead of concentrates, and it does not require my personal use to justify ownership. With that lens, a primary residence usually fails the test. That does not mean never buy. It means judge it on use value and treat the money you put into it as spending plus some recoverable value later, not as your main growth engine. Then I apply 2 simple guardrails. I look at time horizon, because the more years you expect to stay put, the more you spread transaction costs and the less volatility matters. Under about 7 years, buying rarely beats renting once you tally fees and flexibility. Over 10 years, owning can make sense if the price relative to rent is sane. That relative price is my second guardrail. I compare the annual cost to own, including realistic maintenance, taxes, insurance, and interest, to the annual cost to rent. If owning costs much more without clear offsetting value, I keep renting and invest the difference. The labels alone calm the decision. You stop trying to make your couch earn a yield, and you start letting your investments do that job. Once you separate use from investment, your plan gets cleaner. You can buy a home for stability and still build wealth somewhere else on purpose. You can also rent without shame while your portfolio compounds. The practical steps look like this in plain language. You estimate total annual cost to own, not just the mortgage. You include interest, property taxes, insurance, and a realistic maintenance allowance. A reasonable rule of thumb for maintenance plus CapEx is around 1% of the home value per year for an average detached house, more if it is older or complex. If your market offers a similar place to rent, you compare the annual rent to that total owner cost. The price to rent ratio gives you a quick read. If a $400,000 home rents for about $2,200 per month, that is roughly $26,400 per year. The price to rent is about 15. That can be reasonable. If it would rent for $1,600, the ratio is 21, and owning is probably expensive relative to rent. Then you layer in your time horizon. If you plan to stay 3 to 5 years, the cost to buy and sell can wipe out most appreciation. If you are confident about 10 years, small differences in annual cost matter less, and the lifestyle win can carry more weight. Finally, you decide where the growth engine lives. If you buy, you still automate investing in broad market index funds every month, so your wealth is not a single address. If you rent, you automate investing the difference between renting and the all-in owner cost, plus any down payment you did not deploy. That way, both roads lead to a growing portfolio. The result is calm. You are not gambling on a neighborhood trend. You are choosing housing for life reasons and investments for money reasons. Let us run a simple 10-year example with round numbers so you can feel the mechanics. Imagine a $400,000 home. You put 20% down, so $80,000 up front, and take a $320,000 mortgage at 6.5% fixed for 30 years. The principal and interest payment lands around $2,025 per month. Add property tax at about 1.2% of value, which is $4,800 per year or $400 per month. Insurance averages maybe 0.5%, about $2,000 per year or $167 per month. Maintenance at 1% adds roughly $4,000 per year or $333 per month. Your all-in monthly cost before utilities is about $2,925. Buying also had closing costs, say $12,000, which we can treat as sunk at the start. Now compare to renting a similar place for $2,200 per month, with maybe $20 for renter insurance. The renter pays about $2,220 and can invest their unused cash. The homeowner is paying about $705 more each month, and they have $80,000 tied up in the down payment. Let us track results after 10 years. For the owner, the mortgage paydown builds equity slowly at first. After a decade, at 6.5%, you might reduce the loan from $320,000 to near $270,000. so roughly $50,000 in principal paid. If the home appreciates at 3% per year nominal, the price goes from $400,000 to about $537,000. Selling at that price costs fees around 6% or $32,000, leaving about $505,000. Subtract the remaining loan near $270,000 and the owner walks with about $235,000. Compared to the $80,000 down, that is a $155,000 net gain, ignoring the monthly costs you had to pay either way to live somewhere. For the renter, the $80,000 they did not put down goes into a broad index fund at a 7% average annual return. In 10 years, that becomes about $157,000. They also invest the $705 monthly difference while it exists. Using the same 7% annual assumption, those contributions add around $125,000 after 10 years. Combined, the renter's invested capital is roughly $282,000. Rents will likely rise, and owner costs will too, but the comparison shows the point. Once you include opportunity cost and the cash flow gap, the primary home often underperforms a simple, diversified portfolio. It can still be worth buying for life reasons. Just do not count it as your main growth strategy. People push back with two ideas: leverage and forced savings. Leverage is borrowing to buy a larger asset than your cash would allow. It amplifies outcomes. When prices rise, your equity grows fast. When prices stall or fall, your equity can vanish. In a primary home, leverage comes with concentration risk because almost all your net worth can sit under one roof. That is different from a diversified portfolio where no single company can sink you. Opportunity cost is the quiet counterweight to leverage. Every dollar living inside your walls is a dollar not compounding elsewhere. Equity in a house is illiquid. You can tap it with a refinance or a line of credit, but those come with fees, interest, and the risk that credit tightens when you need it most. The forced savings argument says a mortgage makes you build equity because the bank forces you to pay principal. It is true that principal paydown is a form of saving. The catch is that the savings are trapped and can be offset by market moves or big repairs. If you struggle to save, a mortgage can be a helpful constraint. If you are disciplined, automated investing into a low-cost index fund replicates the discipline with better liquidity and diversification. I treat forced savings as a behavior tool, not an investment strategy. If you buy, set up automatic retirement and brokerage contributions anyway. If you rent, treat your first of the month investment as your rent to your future self. Either way, do not mistake a loan schedule for a growth engine. That engine is ownership of productive assets that pay you. There are real cases where property earns its place in the investment bucket. If a property produces income because someone else pays to use it, you cross the cash flow test. That could be a classic rental, a small multi-unit, or house hacking where you rent a room or a separate unit and your living costs fall. Imagine buying a duplex for $500,000 with 20% down and a loan on $400,000 at 6.5%. If each side rents for $2,000 and you live in one, the other side brings in $2,000. After mortgage principal and interest around $2,530, taxes and insurance near $700, and maintenance at $400, the rent can cover much of the bill. If you rent both sides, the total $4,000 of rent might cover the costs and yield a small net income, subject to vacancies and repairs. That is an investment lens. Flipping is another route, but it is a business, not passive investing. Your return comes from skill, speed, and market timing, with real risk of carrying costs if things slip. Short-term rentals can also produce income, but depend on local rules, seasonality, and management intensity. The pattern is the same if you can hold the property vacant and it still makes sense on paper, or if it would be worth owning without your personal use, it belongs in the investment conversation. If the numbers only work because you are living there and not counting your time and risk, it belongs in the use bucket. The line is simple and it keeps expectations honest. What about places that seem to only go up? Some markets have long stretches of strong appreciation due to job growth, land constraints, and migration. Buying there can feel like a slam dunk. Just remember 3 grounding points. First, timing matters. A 5-year window starting at a peak can erase a decade of average gains. Second, regional fortunes change. Tech booms rotate, taxes and policy shift, infrastructure reroutes demand. Third, your personal horizon and the price to rent still matter. If owning costs far more than renting in a hot city, you are paying a premium for the privilege of being locked in. That can be fine if you value roots and plan to stay 10 years or more. It is costly if you leave in 3. On the other side, in slow growth areas, owning can be a calm choice if prices are modest versus rent, and you genuinely want permanence. In both cases, flexibility has a price. Renting keeps optionality high. Owning can hedge future rent increases, which is a real benefit, but the hedge is not free. You are swapping variable rent for fixed mortgage payments, plus taxes, insurance, and repairs that still move. If you decide to buy, reduce regret risk by choosing a home you would be happy to hold through a flat decade with payments that fit comfortably under your income. If you decide to rent, reduce drift risk by automating investing so you do not look back and realize the freedom went to extra streaming services. The edge cases are not loopholes. They are reminders to anchor choices in your timeline, your market's rent economics, and your need for flexibility. Here is how I would run this decision in the real world. I would price my life first. If the home clearly improves daily life and I can see myself there for 10 years, I keep it on the table. Then I run the numbers. I total the annual cost to own, including mortgage interest, taxes, insurance, and a serious maintenance budget, and I compare it to renting something close in quality. I translate that into a price to rent ratio and note whether owning costs far more than renting. I check my time horizon and my job flexibility. Under 7 years, I give renting the edge unless the ratio is skewed in favor of owning. Over 10, I let the lifestyle win matter more. I keep wealth building separate either way. If I buy, I stay well within comfort on the payment, keep a 3 to 6 month emergency fund, and keep maxing retirement and a low-cost index fund so I am diversified beyond one address. If I rent, I invest the down payment and the monthly gap on autopilot, and I revisit the buy math each year instead of shaming myself. The goal is the same on both paths: a life that feels steady and a portfolio that works while you sleep. I would love to hear your actual number. What is the price to rent ratio for the home you are looking at, and how many years do you realistically plan to stay? Share it in the comments. If this reframed something for you, tap like and subscribe so we can keep building clear, evidence-based money habits together. Your future self cares less about whether you had a yard and more about whether you owned a slice of thousands of businesses compounding for decades. Get that part right and the rest gets easier.